good base for us to have some really robust discussions and try to understand more insight on IoT. I've got a really good mix of industry panelists that I'd like to introduce on stage. I will have some time for questions at the end, so we'll try to fit that in as possible, where possible. Can I call upon Craig Boshoff, COO for Real Telematics, George Kalebaila, Executive Product Manager at Huawei Technologies, Lindelani Ramukumba from Absa. You mind coming up, please? Daniel Lotto, Head of Bids and Tenders at Itec SA. I think let me sit on this side. It'll be easier. If you gentlemen can sit on that side, I think we'll probably can see everyone as well. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. I think we had a really good start this morning. I always love Lee's presentations. He actually makes it practical, but he creates the balance of where we're going and what we need to do, as a country. So let me start. We've got a couple of good topics, where we're going to try to make it more practical. But let me start just to really let's talk about. I always want to bring it down to basics, and it's important really to understand what IoT is, so that we can get into the challenges and really know what we're working with. So Forbes actually, defines IoT as a concept of basically connecting devices, a device that has an on and off switch that connects to the internet. So that's quite simple. But if you look at where we're going with IoT, and you'll see in our discussion going forward, it's more about an ecosystem, right? It's about an ecosystem in terms of vendors, providers, cloud providers, and how we work in terms of APIs and hardware and devices. So we really need to think about what it means, bring it down to basics. So before I continue, you'll see some of the aspects coming through. I've got some stats. I just want to share it with everyone in terms of the numbers, so we know what we're working with. Some of the debate and the questions are going to come out quite nicely. But if you look at International Data Corporation, in terms of what they're predicting, they've predicted worldwide market will reach a total of $1.7 trillion in 2020. From an Africa perspective, what does that mean? So South Africa will account to 2 billion of this figure and believes Internet of Things is a great opportunity for Africa, and there's huge opportunity. So I think if you look at it in a nutshell, Africa is sitting in a good position. It's about how we understand this technology, but it's not about the technology. It's about everything around the ecosystem, and I think that's what we're going to try to touch on today, so it can just give you a better understanding of what you can do going forward. If we look at the context, so they just put the context down, and I think IoT has been following the trends around, cloud and so forth. Africa is very different to Europe, and I think we need to just take a step back and understand what IoT means in terms of Africa. If we look at basically reality, we need to look at a couple of aspects, and those aspects will allow us to go look at our approach and how we do things in South Africa and in Africa. So what I want to do now is actually go through with my panel just to understand the concept of IoT. Where are we? And maybe I'll start with Daniel, just in terms of IoT. Where are we? What is it that we, what is your, in your field, what is it that you would like to comment around IoT, where we are as a country right now?
Thanks, Abdul. I think we, from an IoT perspective, we technology savvy. I think everybody in the room understands the concept of IoT, understands how IoT could potentially impact people's lives. And the sort of nitty-gritties, there's very nice presentations in the stands outside the auditorium of people with massive propellers on their heads thinking about the technology behind it. I think where, from a data perspective, where we're missing the boat a little bit is what Bridget alluded to this morning. It's things talking to people, and it's that people aspect. So it must always almost be something to the effect of the Internet of people when we're dealing with Africa.
From a practicality perspective, use case, maybe just touch on that.
Well, from a health perspective, I mean, offline, and I think Craig should comment on that. On a hierarchy of needs, what does Africans need? What do we need that's different from, let's say, the United States or the China? And it's that solution set that we need to address.
Okay, great. Rama, from a banking perspective, maybe just put a touch on in terms of IoT and where we are, and what is our challenges and what are we moving towards in terms of the practicalities?
I think the challenges that we're seeing, especially from a financial service point of view, it's the consumer obviously is becoming much more a digital native being, and as they become more of a digital native, I think we're struggling or we're slow in building an ecosystem that respond to what the customers need versus what as technocrats we can conjure up. So I think there's a need to have an ecosystem building cap on head, and by and large I think it's an area where there's a great gap. So we are slow to partner. I think we've got a mentality of being a one-man show. We want to do everything on our own. Whereas I think if we can see more solution thinking, IoT in itself won't satisfy the customer needs. It's a combination of that, a combination of AI, combination of data, and a combination of other solutions that I think are sitting in this hall.
And it's a journey, right? It's something that's not going to happen overnight. You need to look at what the value is and understand where your customer is as part of the journey, who you serve, and the value around IoT and what it brings to your business. Right. George?
Well, from Tuesday this morning's presentation, he asked a question, I think, when he was talking about some of the dilemmas and the uncertainties of IoTs. Where do you start? And I think for me, that is critical, especially in Africa, because we should start from the problem. What business problem or particular problem that we're trying to solve, then we move from there to create a solution that provides, that delivers that value. And I think that is where, most of the mismatch is happening, because we tend to take IoT as a technology and try to sell it or present it as that. But I think it has got massive opportunity to solve Africa's, a problem. And I think from our perspective, we tend to look at what kind of value can we deliver by harnessing the power of the ecosystem. And the key challenge with IoT is it has got a very disaggregated value chain. So no one provider can provide all the aspects of the ecosystem. And so you need very good partnering capability to enable that end-to-end solution so that you deliver value to the customer. And we are seeing, some offshoots where that is starting to happen. And I think sometimes when we talk about IoT, we talk about the sexy stuff, but there are a lot of stuff where IoT is delivering, value in agriculture, in retail, and also in manufacturing.
How far are we off where we are right now in terms of just getting to the maturity level? I know you've worked quite a lot in IDC as well, and now with the telecoms. How are we off? What's the maturity in South Africa? What's the opportunity as well? Maybe just if you can comment on that.
Actually, South Africa is a very interesting environment because, IoT is developing. Although it's a new thing, but it's developing through machine-to-machine kind telemetry kind of environment. And South Africa is quite mature from those traditional machine-to-machine, kind of solutions. In some cases, we've seen, and I think Craig can comment about that, we've seen actually a number of homegrown South African companies going into the world to provide some solutions like that, especially because of the unique challenges that we have. if we talk about vehicle tracking, I mean, all the big players have got roots here because of the kind of, advantage and experience they have. But what I call native IoT solutions, that is still very native. It's very, nascent. It still has to grow because we need to do a lot of, proving the value and, finding good business models that work and deliver, value, not just for the customer, but also for the players across that, ecosystem. So I think from that perspective, we have to look at Africa with two lenses. One, from the traditional machine-to-machine, which is quite mature, and the other one with IoT lens, which is still has to grow or starting to grow.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, maybe let me move to the next question in terms of the practicality and approach. Maybe Craig, in terms of working with the technologies, on a customer level, what are the actual, where do we start in some cases from the customer perspective? What would the journey start and look like? And what are the practicalities of the approach versus practical use cases that you can just share with us in terms of IoT in Africa?
Thanks, Abdul. Yeah. First of all, IoT in Africa, probably in the world, is still in the embryo stage. We've got a long way to go, and the world is our oyster in that respect. We find that there's two challenges. The one thing is we've been doing IoT for many, many years. It's just been called telemetry. We've just given it a new sexy name, IoT. And the main difference between IoT is that because of technology, the product, the components that form part of the product are smaller, they're cheaper, and of course they use less power. So because of that, that's enabled us to monitor things that we typically never used to monitor because of costs prohibitive or power consumption or something to that effect. So that is the first thing, is all of a sudden we're getting a rush of people saying, I want to monitor this, I want to monitor this, I want to monitor this. And we're not sure if all of those are practical at this stage. Are there not more important things to do? That's the one thing. Then the other thing is to actually educate the customer or the consumer or the end user rather on what IoT is. The fundamental of IoT is small data, and it's a true digital data as opposed to a graph coming through from a refrigerator, for example, where you've got an analog graph of temperature every 5 minutes, and then you'll have a look and see which temperatures are out of range. Where IoT would rather not bombard you with piles of data that you'll have to sit and analyze yourself. It'll wait for that variances or that out of range, and then send a transmission and an alert, which will pop up on your phone. You don't have to go and look at a graph on a computer. So that is a big challenge for us, is to educate the customer, to instill a trust in the customer, that they can trust that this product that they never hear from will warn them when whatever the case is. But I think the most exciting thing about IoT and the use case in South Africa particularly, and this is definitely need to be rolled out for the rest of Africa, is the opportunity that it brings for spin-off work. One company that we partner with, when they're doing projects, they can have up to 400 laborers that they've skilled themselves. They've skilled that are doing installations. They also have got an initiative where they're taking 30 students and they've given them laptops, and they pay for a lecturer to go there every Saturday and educate these students on this industry, so that we can create future generations in that thinkers. So
just to start, where do they start? Do they get a sensor, get the data, and then start moving from there? Where would be a base so that they can see the value of IoT? I think that's what we kind of want to do: get the value and then move forward within the ecosystem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the use case, for example, meter reading, utilities. I think it's probably one of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
Is monitoring meters. Why would you want to monitor a meter? Well, first of all, you get the meter reader who gets the digits incorrect, or it's only every third month that you get your bill. Secondly, if there is a leak, you could wait 3 months before you know that there's a leak. If you have a meter reading every day, you can pick up a leak, or you can pick up a high flow, and you can action according, your production can be based on the consumption at the consumer level. So that's probably a use case scenario. Getting that data, you can just imagine what you can do once you've got that data at a central point.
I think one of the challenges a lot of organizations is actually making sure they can get the data right, and utilize that as the advantage going forward. I think those are the big challenges at the moment, right? One of from your customers in terms of how they get the data and how they consolidate the data.
Yeah, so getting the data, that's pretty much done. I mean, you've got guys like, you've got the telcos, Squidnet. So they're getting the data, getting it back into a central point, into a database. That's pretty easy. It's presenting that data. And there are a lot of companies that have got dashboards and stuff like that. Right. And I think that's going to be the decider between company A and company B, is how that data is presented.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sure,
I just want to add on to that, because I think that comes back to our definition of IoT, and that's getting back to basics. IoT isn't a magic bullet, or data monitoring isn't a magic bullet. You still need a sound business principle running as a foundation to deliver on the service. So you can have as many leak detectors as you want, and I think that comes back to George's point that in Africa this could be an enabler. Because you can have 200,000 leak detectors. If you don't have one plumber to fix it, you will pay the insurance premium. And everything else that goes around that. So it's an absolute enabler, and I think maybe we must, from a ecosystem point of view, what you were referring to was to work together. There's probably something there.
Yeah, I think we'll get to that, but what I want to just talk about the challenges that we have in terms of getting this going. There's a couple of challenges, and I think in our company as well, in terms of ensuring that there's a lack of standards, first of all. Security and privacy is a big thing. I think that's, how do we manage the data? How do we report on the data? And I think the biggest one, and maybe, Rami, if you can come in there from a skills perspective, we challenge in terms of how do we create this? How do we, provide the journey? Anything, just maybe you want to comment on your side in terms of the skills development, from a banking perspective, or is there anything you want to comment, or maybe Daniel, if you want to continue something?
So I think one of the gaps that I think we see is that obviously the skills required for the type of tomorrow we need. I think we're not influencing the numbers that are required. I mean, the reality, if you were to compare the Africa case study with the Chinese case study, you'll then appreciate that they don't put lip service to the number of engineers that they're generating to work in this industry. So some of the skills that are required are deep skills, but you need them in large numbers to have an impact it needs. So currently what normally happens in the market that we operate, I mean, if I just look at the South African market, we tend to be fighting for the same skills level. So there's a lot of hopping of the same skill sets, or we then have to import the skill capability. So there's something to be said around investing in pumping out a large quantity of skills that are required. And I don't think government alone or public sector alone have the IP or the knowledge, and I think that's where private sector we need to come to the party, because some of these skill sets either sit within ourselves or we understand what it requires to accelerate that skills that is required for the capability we need.
I can't remember, sorry, I can't remember who the quote was by, but somebody said that traditional education will die in our lifetimes. That's where it's going, and I couldn't agree with you more on investing in skills, not necessarily education.
Absolutely. George?
There are two aspects. I tend to look at, especially the skills aspect in two ways, especially from IoT perspective. So the technical skills, I think that is not a big deal.
That's not the issue.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. I mean, because most of this can be offered as a managed kind of, solution. The vendors have got that covered, unless you want to do that, in-house. And then, I mean, we heard this morning, that would be destroying value if you want to go that way. But I think where the deeper discussion should be done, and I think this is across, is the new digital skills that are required, especially around making key decisions from data. So it's data science, analytics, and also from the business side, how does business interpret this data to gain competitive advantage? Because if you can have a multitude of data scientists, but if you cannot harness that data to deliver competitive advantage for you, then you are dead.
Yeah.
So I think I think this is where a combination of things come through, and we see that, especially what Lindelani, this pool of new skills will never be enough, and even in South Africa, and we are competing, globally, and I think this is where we have to be a little bit more innovative. How we use maybe the cloud, or we use other ways to deal with it. And of course, from the government perspective now, we start from early on to train our kids to think in digital terms and to be very, very conversant with this kind of stuff, because
there's a risk there, I think, because the problem is that currently there's a protection layer in the marketplace, be it cultural, be it language-based, be it there's definitely a protection layer. But data's data. I mean, there's no language or culture. If there's a leak, let's carry on with that use case. But if there's a leak, it tells you there's a leak, and it will tell you that in any which language you want. So there's a risk there.
I think before we get into the ecosystem discussion in terms of where we are in development, let's just talk about IoT strategy in terms of how it impacts business, because that's an important point, right? In terms of business value. The start would be to look at where your business is and your business processes, and then to look at what value IoT can bring value to your business, as well as understanding what value your customer is going to achieve, right? Those are important to start off with. And I think, a lot of that is to get the buy-in from the board and from the business to understand what it means to the company. Because once you have that, you then be able to then show value. And I think how some of the companies are doing it today, they're doing it piecemeal. So my previous company, they did a proof of concept. Okay, they started to say, okay, what is it going to achieve? It's going to achieve profitability. Is it going to achieve efficiency? Is it going to bring in revenue? What is it going to do, right? So those are the aspects that needs to be put forward. And then say, okay, let's do a proof of concept. Let's see if it works. And if it does work, then we kind of look at it from an ecosystem perspective. I don't know, Craig, if that's some of your customers have adopted that approach, but let's get into the ecosystem discussion. But I think that's a start, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that getting back to the nice-to-haves and grudge buys, obviously, nice-to-haves, you have to have the spare cash to do it. And it's quite strange. You can say to somebody, I'm going to save you X amount of money over the period, but it's that capital outlay, or it's that initial outlay, or the signing of the contract that's there's still reluctance in there. The concept or the industry has to prove itself, so that now when you go to somebody and you say, well, I'm going to sell you a DSTV decoder, they know what it does, and they know it works, and they're comfortable with it. But if you go to say someone, I'm going to do something, I'm going to monitor 20,000 of your devices, it's about getting the buy-in and the trust from the end user. And that's going to take the IoT industry growing, where we get enough early adopters so that we can get past the point on the bell curve where we get the masses to start doing it. I think that's the trick, and that's where we are at the moment in time. It's exciting times.
All right. Okay, we're running out of time. Maybe just to end off, let's talk a little bit, final comments from you, George, maybe on the ecosystem and what we're doing around the partnerships. And maybe where are we from a development of the African ecosystem, IoT. Maybe let's end off maybe final comments from everyone so we can give enough time for comments, questions from the audience as well.
Just a quick comment. We come from different industries here. And I think if you're really thinking about IoT, what you should be thinking about is how does IoT enable you to do business better and deliver good value for your customers. If in retail, you can use IoT to learn a lot about your customers and deliver a better customer experience. In banking, we've seen the effect that it is having. So it is actually giving rise to new business models altogether. So, we are starting the IoT journey today. We don't know where it's going to lead us, tomorrow. I think in terms of the ecosystem, and I think this is where the excitement I'm really excited about. We need to change the mindset that not one person. In the past, we need, if there is a business capability that we need to learn now, is how to partner. And how to partner effectively to deliver value for our customers, because no one partner in that ecosystem of value chain can deliver the end-to-end solution. And I think, for me, from African perspective, we've started seeing that happening a little bit, but we still need, a lot of mindset change from industry players to, understand that sometimes it is better to get a small value of the cake, but spread it over a larger base than to get a bigger pie of the cake over a small, base.
And it's a journey.
I agree, because there was lots of conversations amongst us and conversations I've overheard on the floor outside today, where one of the big mobile telcos couldn't deliver on a really simple solution at one of the big banks just because of the way that they wanted to do business. And it's that type of mindset that I think we need to change, and we need to take a little bit of responsibility to be able to deliver those solutions to our customers. I agree completely with you, George.
And it takes a little bit of innovativeness as well. With that.
Yeah.
Just to be things outside the box a bit in terms of how we can do things differently, right?
Yeah, the value chain is long.
Absolutely.
I think there's a long value chain, because the value that you can actually deliver is massive. But like you absolutely rightly say, there's no one solution provider that can come in and do for a turnkey. The one word I haven't heard anywhere today was turnkey, which is quite funny.
That's interesting. Craig, any final comments? And then maybe to Telematics.
I think just for Africa is just understanding what their hierarchy of needs are. We've got what is the most important? Is it security, and then is it food and water, good food and water, shelter, and then comfort and ecosystem. How does that fit in? And I don't think that we have answered or even scratched the surface today. I think we need many, many more hours, and probably people that are a lot better educated than us, no disrespect, gents, to define what is the needs and how IoT can help with security. We've got ideas on how we can help with food and water, agriculture. IoT is powerful in agriculture. But getting those sensors in the ground to monitor the water content in the middle of Nigeria or Ethiopia or Benin from here or from wherever in the world, how do we go about that? And I think that's going to be the trick over the next couple of years.
I think that's what is important is to have the conversations going. We started, I think South Africa started the first 3D ear transplant. We're breaking boundaries, right? Yeah. It's coming. So we need to start thinking about what we can do in our businesses and what's going to make and how we transform our businesses. Last comment, maybe Lindelani, maybe just to end off for us, and then we can get into the questions. Any final comment from your side?
I think we started the conversation by talking about the customer's needs. And I think, for example, there are many challenges Africa needs to solve. We need to solve food security. We need to make the environment much more secure. I think IoT becomes relevant if it starts tackling those real African challenges we have. And we have proven we can do that as Africans. I mean, we have M-Pesa, something that Europe can't even comprehend how it works. So if we find and define those problems on a day-to-day basis, and you leverage some of these innovative technologies like IoT, then it will become sustainable in the long run.
Excellent. And I think it takes a different approach to what Europe is doing. We need a localized approach. We need to think differently outside the box and make it work for us in an African way.
So, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our panelists, please. Thank you very much. Abdul Baba is the head of IT operations at the Kwese Media.